Today there are still many Second World War vehicles and aircraft that lie where they crashed or were knocked out. There have been in the past few years been aircraft pulled from swamps, lakes and raised from the depths of the ocean. Some of these pieces of history remain war graves, but in the year 2000 there was a shocking discovery made in Estonia. A young local boy had been walking past a lake and he noticed tank tracks leading into the lake but not coming out. He then saw air bubbles emerging from the lake and he thought there must have been something at the bottom of the lake, and when the boy told his discovery to a member of the local history club, arrangements were made to see what was at the bottom of that boggy lake. But what was discovered was a shocking World War II tank that contained many secrets. A T-34 was pulled from the depths, but shockingly contained the markings of the German army. What was the story of the bogged German T-34? To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. The T-34 was one of the most iconic tanks of the Second World War. It carried a powerful armament, especially when it was upgunned to the 85mm version, but it had a huge effect on the conflict. The T-34 was actually praised by German generals when it was encountered during Operation Barbarossa, but the biggest strength to the tank was the fact it could be created very quickly and pushed out of the factories in very quick time. This meant that the Soviet Red Army had strength in numbers, and the production surpassed anything the Germans could make by a huge amount. There were in total 84,070 T-34s, including almost 49,000 T-34-85 variants, and it was the most produced tank of the Second World War. But there were many Soviet T-34s that did fall into the hands of the enemy. When the German army captured military equipment and vehicles, they did tend to use it themselves. The T-34 was no exception, and the vehicles would be painted with German markings such as the Balkenkreuz or the swastika. These T-34s were actually even given a German designation as Panzerkampfwagen T-34 747. The tanks would be taken from the front lines intact and then sent to German workshops to be modified, and there were local tank factories in occupied lands used for this. They were often given a German commander's cupola and were fitted with German radio equipment. The first T-34s were used by the Germans in the summer of 1941, but they even used some Soviet damaged tanks as pillboxes, and tank crews were trained on them. In eastern Estonia, the 50-kilometre wide Narva front saw brutal battles and fighting between the German army and the Soviets in 1944. Estonia had declared itself neutral during World War II, however it was falling under the Soviet influence and later would be occupied by soldiers of the Red Army. There were many deaths at this point, however fighting on the Narva front was a German T-34 which had been kitted out with German markings. There were over 100,000 men killed and 300,000 men wounded on the Narva front, but at some point during the battle, the German forces took the decision to dump one of the T-34s in German service at the bottom of a bog. It's not known why they did this. It may have been to ensure that the vehicle did not fall back into the hands of the Soviets, or it may have been damaged, and to prevent the radio falling into enemy hands, the Germans ditched the vehicle. The tank fell into the boggy bank of the lake near to Jervi. Specifically, this tank was a T-34 76A variant and a 27-ton vehicle. It sank to the bottom of the boggy lake and rested for 56 years. The local war history group began to research a vehicle that the boy had told them about, and expeditions to the bottom of the lake took place. At a depth of 7 metres, the tank was discovered resting under a 3-metre layer of peat. The military historians then decided they would attempt to pull the tank out and to free it. In September 2000, the manager of a local company helped out and used his company's bulldozer to try and lift the T-34 from the depths. The pulling operation began in the morning, and by 3 p.m. that afternoon, the T-34 had been pulled out of the bog. Some of the local volunteers had, before the big lift, sent divers down to wash the silt and mud from the tank. But when the tank emerged, it was clear that this was not a Soviet T-34, but was a captured German one, with German markings such as the Balkenkreuz noticeable on the top of the turret and also on the hull. But what was even more shocking was the incredible state of preservation that the tank remained in. Because of the low oxygen levels inside the bog, the tank had been remarkably preserved, and with this it looked as if it had just been fighting during World War II, as if it was yesterday. There were also 116 shells, all live, found on board the vehicle They needed to be dealt with in a proper manner, as they could have gone off. But there was no rust on the vehicle, and shockingly all of the systems, except the engine, was said to have been in good working condition. But the bogged T-34 was a very rare tank. It was a vehicle that fought on both the Soviet and German side, and there were plans to restore the tank, and these have been carried out. There have been many T-34s found in the years following the Second World War, but very few were used by the Germans, and the bogged vehicle had a remarkable story during World War II. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.